knowing this is a desperate journey, untangling our projections and stories, sitting on the edge of our history, knowing that refusing entry would only pull us farther and farther out to sea, resolving not to leave this fire for another day, but to sit in the center, attending to the breath after breath with this simple refrain, I am here, I am here. Aware, deep down knowing, breath could be shallow or deep, sometimes long or short, always attempting to catch it, releasing, softening, breathing, supported by this eternal presence, life breathing itself. How great to know it has worked for eons, slowly dissolving the darkness, tentacles of the past, dissolving, the power of the breath, releasing multiple contractions, giving way to the certainty that this breath is enough. Awakening assured by our lineage, so clearly spelled out. So tonight I wanted to talk about mental wandering. Anybody do that? You know, it's kind of goes with the territory of human beings. And at the same time, I was giving you some instructions on what is this. It's Ajahn Sumedho called the sound of silence. Uh, I think in the Hindu tradition, they call it the nada, and the Sufi tradition, the shabkar. I may have those reversed, but this is something that all meditation practices have used in some way, simply because instead of the breath is great. It is something that tunes us into change because it's so apparent. But there is also the shabkar, this nada, or this sound of silence, which is the sound behind uh, everything, and it holds it all. And Ajahn Sumedho used to say, "Well, this is where I go when I go to Buddhist conferences. It's like I just listen to that buzz because he said the rest is too boring for me." So, so if something gets too boring for you, always have that to kind of rest on, because it's something that's, we all, it's all part of the living system. And, as long as you don't have tinnitus, and if you do, I would recommend just staying with the breath. But if you have tinnitus, uh, yeah, it's easier just to find something that's not so aggravating, which tinnitus can be. But if putting the attention on the consistency of the sound of silence is a great, sometimes you can say it's a great discovery because it actually allows us, because it also is rising and passing away at very rapid speeds, not different than the breath, but the breath is it's a more controlled and slow system. But that shabkar, that nada sound, you can say it's the sound of river, it's a sound of the universe, it's the universal hum, it's sometimes referred to as the om, and its primary conditioning. And it is a great, and it's always there. So if we can train the mind to actually begin to recognize it, you can walk around. And the thing that's wonderful is you can say, "Oh, I can't do two things at once." Oh no, you can be there and do other things. It's not exclusive in that way. And so in that way, it can be really helpful, you know. Tonight, I was going to talk about this thing called Papancha, which is mental proliferation, or it's another way of naming it is the wandering mind. You know, and we are sense creatures, so we have what they call the five aggregates of we have our body, our senses, we have our kind of mental formations and uh, and and consciousness, which are the kind of bedrock of all the things. And here we have something that's very accessible, and is something that I find very helpful in creating a defining factor for the practice of meditation. It's good if you have practiced the breath, or some, in some sense, you've had some training that has allowed you to be able to turn the mind around on itself and note what it is that's happening, and the capacity to listen. It's interesting because I think you all know what mind wandering is. And you come and you sit down, and I always think, well, if we could take and if we took everybody in this room, or everybody on Zoom as well, and you had little pictures of what was going on in their minds, you would be amazed. You know, I'll just put it at that. Because our nature is that we wander off. And, we're so good at um, the four things I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about was the fact that there is kind of the wanting mind, there is the aversive mind, there is views and opinions, and that's so prevalent for the mind. It is constantly readjusting itself to figure out how to, sometimes just to feel better. It's like, well, I'll try to figure out how to get more of that, or to keep that away from me. And these are just the facts of the nature of our mind and its nature. It's nice that opinions and views are, to me, they are kind of, in some ways, we have, first of all, you're all grown up now, believe it or not, but you are, and because of that growing up, you have these, as said, is like, it is cultural and family conditioning, and that conditioning is something that sometimes has to be questioned. I shouldn't say sometimes. It has to be questioned. And in a way, that this process of meditation is to liberate the past and not anticipate the future. So to liberate the past, what does that mean? It's simply the fact that a person sits down, and I remember, back, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago, my first 10-day retreat, actually, I didn't follow the instructions. What I did was I actually went back through my life for 10 days. I just kept trying to get a chronological, and I was probably 21 year, 22 years old. And I tried to get a chronological sense of what I'd been and who I was, you know? And, it was for me, a necessary piece, because I don't know, maybe it was just psychedelics or something, but I've certainly gotten uh, out there a bit. And I needed to find, who am I now? And I had to know somehow who I was now by knowing something about who I was, you know. And then when I kind of explored who I was, then I found out I had been highly conditioned by family, country, schools, parents, all of that. There was all this conditioning. And suddenly I came to the fact that I didn't want that conditioning anymore. Actually, it had brought me a lot of suffering. And so there was really a process that you could say that a lot of the meditation practice is based on untangling, you know. So I'm untangling can I say, the neurosis of our past, simply because to see it for what it is, then it frees us up to be here now. And that's really what the objective is. And when you're still being dragged into the past, a bit of it's going to happen, but you don't want to. I mean, people get totally. I guess I can use the word addicted to it in some level, and but they aren't here. You know, they're living in the past, and they're living with the conditions that a lot of them that brought a lot of suffering, and that's what we're doing here on some levels. You know, I like in the morning. One of the things I do is sitting. There's a couple of things. It's wonderful to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It is really a marvelous truth because it kind of plugs you into a history that's been there, which has been pointing towards liberation. There are the precepts of not harming and really being honest, and and in some sense, being honest is also not causing problems, and being careful of language and what we say, and we have to be careful with intoxicants, simply because this is a culture that loves intoxicants. I guess all cultures do. So just anything to um, change what's happening. And so that's really important. And then those are important. There's taking refuge. There is the precepts. There's also our exploring, which is something that can be ongoing, which is really I am of the nature to grow old. I am of the nature to get sick. I am of the nature to die. No matter what I cherish will be taken away from me. My only possessions, my actions. It's great, isn't it? You know, simple, but gets right to the point, you know. And there's something about, they consider that a recollection, something you could do every day to really, in a sense, again, it's all about how do I train myself to be here, you know? And so we have to have some sense of direction, which I think those refuges do. And we have to have uh, some parameters for our speech and action, the precepts, and that we have to have uh, an awareness of the temporal nature of this body, and that all of our all the things we cherish are going to be taken away from you, you know, and not only that, that the only possession or possessions you have are your actions. So that's pretty clear from what I can tell. And it's okay, yes, it's sobering, but why not? You know, because it's not about the sobering that matters. It's really about that mind that clings to, um, in a sense, in our beliefs, in our that we may not recognize it. I know this is, you all know it, but there's also a part of you that doesn't believe it, that you are a temporal creature that's going to die. And, I think for me, it's always been, oh, it's such a relief to know that, I'm not the conditions of my past, and I'm not trying to condition the future because I can't, you know, and that what I'm given or can see day to day is enough, you know. So there is that piece, and I love that about, Buddhism. It's very much based on, I like the word enoughness, that this living is enough, you know, and when it's not enough, then there's wanting. And if there's wanting, then there's this mental proliferation. We start trying to make up things in life. And in many ways, from really a Buddhist point of view, this is about keeping your life as simple and as fulfilled as possible. And I think fulfillment is something that comes from that enoughness. It doesn't come from, more chocolate or best wine or whatever. It doesn't come from that. It comes from this inner knowing that somehow, you know, we in our great intelligence, which we are incredibly intelligent, that and we do have to use that intelligence, but it also has to be balanced with that enoughness to bring us to a place where, you know, we can actually just sit quietly and not create more, more, and more. And that's the enoughness I'm trying to talk about. You know, I am, when I was young, I had a hard upbringing, and because of that, I think there are two things. One, it drove me to the Dharma. It's the good part. And the other was it created a lot of bad habits and what escapist mentality, you know. Any of you have that, and it served me well, you know, and at some point I had to stop and turn around and look at that and see that I wasn't just the product of my suffering, but that suffering actually was something that brought me um, it brought me some intelligence, that I can actually discernment that was not based on that, but the emotional residue had to be untangled. And that's where I think this practice, uh, you know, I will say that because I did a lot of therapy in past, and so uh, I needed in some way to have a balance between what my past had taught me and who I was today. And it's been a great journey, I must say. You know, I don't underestimate it in any way. And yet, um, we all are conditioned creatures. And if we don't look at the condition, because things didn't, they don't happen out of nowhere. And yet, in some ways, they do happen out of nowhere. But they all have causes, conditions. And our job is to look at the causes, conditions. And if we look at those causes, conditions, we may find that they were once upon a time very useful and they probably saved your life, But now, uh, uh, you are not that, you know. It's the wonderful thing to know. You're not your past, even though your past influences you. So I thought, part of this I wanted to just maybe do some questions. And the way we'll do that uh, is it's a little, it's not so complicated, but it's, I, the, people sitting can raise their hand. And after one question, then we can go to, I don't know, whoever's on Zoom. I don't know. Oh, there they are, you know, and they raise their hand. We'll take their question. So if we could start, who we could do the room here first. If there's somebody has a question about their conditioning or their freedom from it, you know.
And you'll
And
want to speak into the mic so that the Zoom audience can hear you. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. And speak.
This is Virginia.
Virginia.
Guess I'm close enough. I've been wanting to bring up um, conditioning, I guess it is, or attachment. It was around the storms of the winter, and how when I didn't have, heat and internet and, our modern conveniences,
Mhm.
I didn't do so well.
Mm.
Plus I'm taking care of my mother, so I was keeping her warm and we were
Right.
running out of wood. But, I lost quite a bit of equanimity during that time. So I just wanted to explore that or bring it to the table.
As you were talking about it, it's uh, we get used to things. We're creatures of habit. So if suddenly you have lights and heat and you have all of that and suddenly it's gone, then there is some, uh, what is it, suffering, pain that comes simply because of that. And we don't have, we have in the Western world, we have control so much over our environment. But I mean, I spent many, many years in India and Nepal where there was no heat, no nothing, you know, and you had to go and get water from the river, and there was something very appealing about it, but there wasn't a choice. And that's the big thing here. Suddenly you have all this, suddenly it goes away. Sort of like, in Buddhist terms, it's like this is a bit of a heaven realm, right? I mean, we're living in a heaven realm. We have water, we have heat, we have all this electronics, all this stuff, and internet and movies and what have you. And and with anything, we get comfortable with what is, and you take that away, and you're in reality. Well, maybe that's a process that, and I don't want to emphasize too much, but dying is a process where things are taken away from you, you know. And, the body doesn't function the same way. You may see some of that with your mom, I don't know. And, you know, um, it's just the way, it's the way the world works. And I'm just so grateful for the, uh, the wonders of electricity, of heat systems, of, you know, uh, turn a faucet on, water comes out, you know. And not that it's like anything, we get used to whatever. I would hate to think we would lose all this. But it's also true that to lose it at first, it's not the end of the world, but it feels like it, you know. And then slowly we adjust. And that's the marvelous thing about human beings. We can then adjust to it in some fashion. Sometimes there's more discomfort than we had hoped, you know, especially for someone like mom, you know. But that's all I know.
And then it looks like Meryl has a question. She raised her hand via Zoom. Meryl,
Yeah,
do you wanna-
I wanted to know about when we talk about letting go of our past. How do you do that?
How do you let go of your past? First, you have to see it. And I think a lot of times, I know, you know, for me, when I went to the India in the 60s, I was essentially running away from my past. That was that was what I had figured out, you know, just keep running. And until I came to uh, the Dharma, and suddenly I realized, oh, I could stop. And then I turned my mind around, going, oh my God, you know. And you know, one of the things was the first 10 days, I just kind of went through my past. The second 10 days, I just cried. You know, it was like, oh my God, all that I went through, and all I learned was I was very agile and young, and I could run. So, you know, India was no big deal. It was just, you know, and going overland and getting sick in Afghanistan and all the, you know, in those days, you couldn't, it wasn't getting on a plane and just landing, you know, it was an incredibly long journey on buses and trains and hitchhiking. And it was, it was its own mess. And yet, you know, I think back on it and I realize how much, how much difficult things that you've done are actually things that bring you now when you think back on them joy. You know, it's interesting. Yeah. And, you know, undoing the past, uh, you know, we are always the past. You know, all that stuff is who we are. But, you know, does it disturb us or bother or cause others problems? Because we're still holding on to things from the past. And I hope that you can let go of. And it takes, you know, in some ways it takes, you know, we use this language of seeing clearly, of seeing it clearly. And then the emotional hook is no longer the same, you know, but it also takes a while. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So this is Russ. And John, I really appreciate the term enoughness. I'm good with enoughness. I was in a conversation recently where one of the people in the room was suggesting or presenting the opinion that the goal of all spiritual seeking and embarking on a spiritual path is to seek and gain enlightenment. So can you elaborate? I mean, is there a continuum or is enoughness enough?
Nice idea. You know, I mean, enlightenment has been something that has been there since beginningless time, that human being could transcend the world. And so some ways, it's this maybe it's the middle way. It's holding the two pieces. One is enlightenment is there. And so there is the, oh, what can I do to support that awakening? And the other is there is enoughness and who I am and where I am. And it's kind of playing these two pieces. So it's really that middle way, the balance between those two. Because if it's, when I was young, I thought, oh, I'll tell you, I wanted to get enlightened. And I thought with a lot of the support that I could get enlightened. And it was something that was actually possible, And then one day I realized, oh, I'm probably not going to get there. But I am going to learn something about love and enoughness. And I think that was the thing that, suddenly one could turn around and say, oh, that's over there and I'm right here and I'm just stepping from here. And I have to be careful where I am here. And not that I lose that, because as I said, it's like two pieces. You hold the ideals, but they are ideals. They're not necessarily, what's going to happen, And again, I remember, I've had teachers say, well, and I'll say this, you're all going to get enlightened. You like that? Why not? And the other thing is that who said you weren't? And so there's a way of learning to hold these two pieces in the sense of what I have here is enough, and that's aware, that knows it can't be anything in the future, and it can't be anything in the past. Actually, it can only be here, and that if I follow that eventually, you will step off the cliff. Sounds good, and but you were born, this is the other, I will say, in some ways you were born already awakened, and you've struggled through this to this point where you can begin to see that you're not seeking. That's the problem, is at some point you have to abandon the seeker. And the seeker then says, oh, I'm enough. This is enough. And if I'm enough and this is enough, then I'll keep walking. And someday I will walk right off the, human condition. And why not?
So Cindy in Dharamsala, India has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Cindy.
Oh, I missed
Hi,
that.
everyone. Hi, John.
Hi, Cindy.
Yeah, from the land of little electricity and still no heat.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much. My question is about the sound of silence and that you referred to. I had an interesting experience where as a kid, I used to go up into the mountains and I would hear this buzz. Then life got in the way for a few decades. And I was doing a sound meditation and suddenly I heard that same sound that I had heard as a child that I hadn't heard for, like I said, many decades. But then I also discovered another sound that was kind of under that. So one sound is more of a kind of sounds like an electrical buzz. And then there seems like there's a sound under that that's a little more low pitch and almost pulsating, more of a swish. And I was told that was more like your blood flow, like when you get really quiet. So I'm just wondering which of these sounds could possibly be the Om sound.
there isn't a right or wrong one. There is just where do you put your attention?
Mhm.
And that's really all it is. And so the ideal is that because one thing about whether it's the stronger sound or whatever, which is kind of the friction, or the subtler sound of the pulse. And you may have to ask a Chinese acupuncturist for sure. But as far as I know, that whichever one of those, it's actually where your mind, the ideal is that the mind settles on one of those. And it's not different than the breath, which is rising and falling. And it's actually very gross in the sense of the body. And where that is subtle. And it also, in some sense, Ajahn Sumedho used to say, well, I use it as a means of knowing awakening. So, it has this possibility of, and whether it's kind of the subtle or the not so subtle, of a constant. And so we train our mind to note that. And then pretty soon, if we do that long enough, we can then be able to walk around and if something on the outside conditions are difficult, we can go to that, which then takes the whole system and calms it down. So it becomes a great uh, uh, a great friend, and
Okay, thank you, John. I also want to thank you for your sense of humor and reminding us that we are grown up, even though it doesn't seem
oh,
like
good.
it.
Any questions from our in-person audience? Nothing? Do we have anyone in the virtual audience that would like to? Oh, it looks like Molly raised her hand. Molly, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, um, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. John, I really appreciate the answers that you give to the questions. They're so simple and funny and complex all at the same time. And one of the things you said just a few minutes ago was about um, not seeking. That you're not going to get there. You have to stop seeking, and then you just keep walking. And it pinged my brain, like it made me remember this time that I was walking my dog, and uh that occurred to me, like nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. Nothing was good, nothing was bad. It just was there. It was just, I was there, the world was there, and there was no extremeness. There was no extreme sadness or joy or heat or cold. It was just kind of bland. And it occurred to me, it's like, is that it? Is that acceptance, or where, like, what is that? Is enlightenment also boring, or is there more? Like, I don't, maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Great.
Molly, I'm not sure if you can hear, but the in-person audience is laughing along
Oh.
with you. Yeah,
I can't hear them, no,
we
but
can relate.
that's good.
I think this is the piece for me is boring is, one of the beautiful things about meditation is that it is the antithesis of boring. You know, once you get into it, you realize, oh, it's boring, but it simply means you're not looking close enough. And that the collectedness of the mind is not collected, it's scattered. And so, and then it's, you know, I always think you have to somehow go through boring as part of this practice. And then once you recognize the boring, which is a feeling, that it's not necessarily so. You know, there's more there. It's just that we're not looking close enough. So, and again, I think a lot of times it's just you have to refocus or focus on. It may be a sensation, it may be a sound, it may be. There's a lot going on all the time, and if we're kind of scattered, then we really aren't. It really is boring. You know, unfortunately. And I also think it's part of our practice. Boring is not something to you know, it's not something to run. But the thing is that boring, what happens is that when we then want to do something else to change the feeling. And if you can stay with boring, you know, one of my teachers once said, you know, boring was the doorway to awakening. Now, how's that one? You know, the doorway to awakening. And so in many ways, this is a setup to note boring, you know, and unfortunately, it is also a doorway. And what happens is people get stuck in the doorway and then go the opposite direction and don't go deeper and don't kind of explore what it is that's there. So it's a big question, you know. But I like boring.
Thank
I think
you. Thank you.
it's one of the great mysteries of this practice.
John, Carol here. Hello, Carol's here. I think, you touched on it, you almost touched on it when you said something about listening to the sound and listening to this sound or that sound. Listening. It's really, to me, listening, uh, you know, who is listening is the question. I mean, yes, I'm listening, it's listening, listening.
It's an is, you know,
Is listening.
it's isness, you know, and so listening is an activity. And that activity can illuminate something, and it can also complicate something, you know. And that's really why this is a wisdom practice somehow, that we don't, you know, end up listening to something and then creating all kinds of tangles around it, you know, just like that's the Papancha mental proliferation. We just start, you know, thinking. And when we think of listening, it's really this practice of being able to hold the silence, because the silence is it is the gift that then allows, you know, in many ways, when we truly listen, then the heart opens to more than just the small things, you know. We're funny creatures. Thank you, Carol.
Anyone from the virtual audience?
This is last question.
Oh,
So
and last question. Oh, we have someone who raised their hand. Betsy, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, John.
hi, Betsy.
Well, I just wanted to say, for a long time, I felt like enoughness was enlightenment. Once you got to a place where you felt that way, then why seek for anything more? Because it just felt like a comfortable way to go through life, to feel enoughness.
Well, Betsy, it's a great gift to have that, but it's really is the holding two pieces. One of them, which has a little, one is has a lot of relaxation and confidence and the other has a little tension, and that tension is that ideal of awakening, and so that is the motivator, which in enoughness, there's not much motivation. Just like enough is enough. Okay, good. I love it, but it doesn't, and that's why you have to keep kind of a balance between these two pieces, and so and I think that's really the whole thing. The middle way is holding this enlightenment and this ease and this enoughness as a balancing act, you know. So that's my answer, Betsy. Good to
Thank
good to hear you.
you.
I can't well, I can see, but it's all right. So we have come to the place in the evening where we're going to turn our attention just to the heart. You know, again, it's kind of this balance between insight and loving kindness. And insight, if it's done properly, brings you to the heart. So there really isn't much difference between the practices, but it is the emphasis. And right now we are going to emphasize the heart as a way of it is kind of the precursor to liberation. So just checking in with your heart. Breathe into your heart. And then, phrases are sometimes they're a little cumbersome, but I like the ones I use. May I live with an open heart. May I live with an open heart. May whatever covers my heart be dissolved. May whatever covers my heart be dissolved. And then just taking a moment to kind of feel this gratitude towards yourself. You're healthy enough right now. You're young enough. You're strong enough. And so there is a sense of that enoughness, but also gratitude for being able to breathe, for the blood to flow, for the body to, in a sense, take care of you. And as we care for ourselves, then we can turn that attention outwards, just to first the people either on the Zoom or people in the room, that they're all these good hearts, because I know your intention. And that so much of Buddhism is just based on intention. So this intention of good heart, and that because we have a good heart. We also know that you have a good heart. So we hold all the community with this great heart. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from any inner or outer harm. May you have ease of being. May you awaken for the benefit of all. And as we extend this out to beings everywhere, they may ultimately benefit from our practice and our time here, that we share any merit, power, or energy that's created through our coming together. So beings everywhere can receive our intention, our wishes. May all beings everywhere be happy.